Her book, when I read it, it actually, I mean, she doesn't outwardly say anything negative against people who don't identify as straight, but throughout the entire text, she assumes that her black female readers are partnered with a man, and that the man is of African descent. So I actually found that problematic. As someone who is partnered with someone of European descent, I just found that kind of weird, because I'm like, well, my partner is white, and how does that work into her philosophy? And then another thing is, she never ever kind of talks about the possibility that, she talks about, you know, make sure your man's sperm is not acidic, and you should be feeding your man particular types of food that make his sperm more alkalizing, because acidic sperm will damage the womb. So I was like thinking, well, what can you offer to women who are in relationships with other women and that they're still having womb problems? You know, what can you offer to them, and kind of be mindful of that. So these are the things I'm thinking about. And I do acknowledge that when people write books, you can't cover everything. So this is what I'm doing. You know, I do a literature review, and then I see the gaps, and I say, okay, you couldn't do this, you couldn't touch on this, so I'm going to go that direction. So in her doctrine for her healing lab, I'm not going to read the whole thing. She basically says, like, if there's something between you and your man, you're having arguments, you know, it's not anything per se bad with you. Check the food you're eating. You know, if you're feeding your man these particular types of food, if you're eating sugar, then you guys are having relationship problems because of the food. And then what I actually found, which I find the most problematic with it, is that she also has this quote where she's like, if there are black male members in your family that they're sexually aggressive or violent, then check the food that you're giving him. And I found that really problematic, but also through a revolutionary black feminist lens, I kind of understood why she said it. So I'll just kind of read that part. So Afua wants to combat male aggression and believes that males and the black woman's family are not naturally sexually aggressive. It is the food that they have been consuming that creates this violence. So quote, sisters, if there is a male in your family who is inappropriately sexually aggressive, get him off the flesh foods immediately. The ham, the barbecue, bacon, hamburger, lamb, veal, all of it. Throw it out of the window, end quote. Now, it's commendable that Afua wants to combat sexual violence of particular black male family members. However, her suggestion implies that this is the colonizer's animal-based food that makes black men sexually aggressive. Afua's suggestion, however, is not a new idea. And if you're familiar with Carol J. Adams' work, she's proposed that meat eating is connected to pornography and other forms of what she would personally consider sexual deviant behavior towards females. And I put deviant in quote because, of course, that's subjective. So she feels that meat eating produces a rape culture and a pornographic culture, not just black men, but all men. She feels that way. So Afua's statement about sexual male aggression kind of puts men and women, I think, back into the binary of women as naturally non-aggressive and men as naturally aggressive. And veganism is kind of glorified as this ultimate consumption practice, while meat eating is demonized as predatory because it's conflated with male sexual aggression. So Val Plumwood, she's passed away unfortunately, but she does a lot of ecofeminist work, and she's never been pro-vegan or vegetarian for everyone. So in her writing, in integrating ethical frameworks for animals, humans, and nature, a critical feminist eco-socialist analysis, she argues that too many ecofeminists tend to create this type of binary and suggest that it's not human predation itself we need to oppose, as in the ontological view, but what certain social frameworks have made of predation or predatory behaviors. And Plumwood argues against the stance that vegetarianism and veganism will create more sexually pure behavior, which Adams and Afua do kind of equate with being abstinent from animal products. So Plumwood continues with, quote, alienated ascetic forms of vegan strategy also fit snugly into the spaces of neo-Christian and neo-Puritan salvational projects and narratives of original sin, bodily temptation, individual struggle and fall, personal virtue and righteousness, revulsion at the flesh, narratives that have been liberally applied in the Christian past to sexuality, end quote. And Plumwood views ecofeminist vegans as prioritizing moral purity over commitment to animal liberation. So Afua never labels herself as an ecofeminist, and nor does she even mention animal liberation, but I found it really interesting that she and kind of Adams kind of equate, what you eat is going to produce particular types of sexual behavior. So I actually find that interesting. But this is where I actually think I can't use either Adams or Plumwood to really fully understand Afua. And I think this is because both of them don't kind of come from this embodied experience of a black female in the USA. They don't really bring in an Afrocentric history or rationale to understanding why Afua may want black women to have black men eat a certain food. So I would also argue that it's where that Plumwood kind of makes the assumption that veganism is kind of like a white, middle-class privileged thing, and that it's racist to think that you should put that on people of color, but it's like she's never even known about the fact that there are people of color that do practice veganism for their own reasons, including decolonialism. So I want to look at Afua and not kind of be like, oh yeah, you're just being just like these other women. I want to kind of reframe it, understand, if you understand the history of how black men and women have been constructed. So it could be that Afua may be using veganism to respond to sexual aggression of certain black male family members because of the unique position that racialized colonialism and its aftermath put black men and women in. Now, within the context of sacred woman, the institution of slavery not only forced black people to be away from their own land, eat a diet that was not theirs, and not be able to practice their African indigenous practices, all of these things also supposedly disrupted healthy sexual practices and philosophies between men and women. It is implied in Sacred Woman that the colonizers' carnicentric and refined foods diet causes black people to have unhealthy relationships with their own sexuality and desires, which is assumed to be heterosexual. For centuries, black people have been hypersexualized within the white imaginary, and in response, many contemporary black females have tried to practice a politics of respectability to abolish the white mainstream notion that they and black men are incapable of being as supposedly sexually pure as white people. So historically to the present, black men have been punished incredibly severely for even being hinted that they committed a sexual crime against white women, punished in a way that white males would never be punished for doing the same thing, particularly to women of color. Suggesting that it is a non-vegan food that black men are eating that is causing them to be sexually aggressive may be Afua's way of fighting against the white supremacist belief that black men are simply that way by nature. Within the logic of African holistic health, Afua's vegan rationale is RBF, and it's an RBF intervention, as she attempts to not put her trust in the mainstream white America for changing their perceptions about black sexuality. And instead, she feels that the only people that can help dispel this myth or curb the sexually aggressive male behavior in some black families is for black females to control it through the preparation of food in the kitchen space. The problem with Afua's suggestion, however, is that it puts the responsibility of curing sexually aggressive males into the hands of black females, and solely through the avenue of vegan food, versus other methods, and like such methods of kind of also making men more responsible for those particular behaviors. At least that's how I read it. However, for Afua, the kitchen becomes the place in which black females are expected to cure themselves, children, men of toxicity and negativity that Afua believes comes solely from the wrong types of foods. And kind of through the lens of feminist geographer Doreen Massey, Afua's perspective can be seen as advocating a proper use of the local, that being the kitchen, space as a micro scale to produce the large scale of a new black nation. In her book, Space, Place, and Gender, Doreen Massey argues how certain spaces have been coded as feminine and masculine, and the black woman's place must be her new, for Afua, the black woman's place must be her new vegan kitchen if she is to make sure that her man is healthy and in his proper place. Afua's rhetoric codes the space of the kitchen as feminine by expecting that black females reconceptualize the space of the kitchen as where they should be to heal their wounds, their families, and the black nation through vegan food preparation. And Doreen Massey kind of, looks at this as a very negative thing, like the kitchen shouldn't be a feminine space, feminine. But then I'm looking at this through like, well, who has been afforded the luxury as being called feminine historically? It's been white middle-class women, where black women have been seen as unfeminine. So I'm kind of looking at it, well, for Afua, to tell black women that you are feminine it's actually kind of letting them know that despite what the mainstream history has told you, that you are not feminine, that you are unfeminine, being in the kitchen is feminine in an empowering, beautiful way. That's kind of how I see how she's using it. So, you know, anti-black racist stereotypes of black women didn't see them as feminine. They saw them as mammies in the white imagination whenever they were in the kitchen. So to be a mammy was unfeminine, and I'm going to put this in quotations, fat and desexualized, because those are also conflated. And that's another part of my dissertation I'll look at, fat phobia and veganism. Hence, it could be that Afua is not using feminine in the same way that Massey is seeing it as an oppressive term. And she's using feminine to describe black females in the space of the kitchen as something empowering. So for her to say, you know, you're naturally feminine is kind of retelling a history that most black women in this country have been told you are not feminine. So for her personally, doing that is kind of a psychic healing of always being told that you're unfeminine. But my question, which is I'm kind of more interested in, is overall, can a black racialized subject raised in the nation of the USA ever fully cure herself of colonialism? And when I look at how Afua offers her vegan strategies and methodologies, I still feel like she's not reflecting on the fact that European colonialism it's more than looking at just like white people and what they've done. It's also a system of ideologies that's not just about phenotypes. So to understand what white and whiteness is, you have to kind of look at histories of gender, proper sexual orientation, all of these things. So colonialism created, yes, this concept of whiteness, but whiteness meant that you were the proper gender, so heteronormative gender, you're the proper sexual orientation, heterosexuality, the proper class, middle class, so all of these things. So I'm wondering how much of that kind of, as much as Afua consciously wants to decolonize some of the things that she says or is implied, such as all black women, I guess, that are reading this book are heterosexual, where does that come from? Does it come from some type of unconscious influence of just kind of being in a society, USA, in which heteronormativity is, I guess, is kind of the status quo, and middle class sensibility is what kind of people look at for the benchmark of what is morals. So that's kind of what I'm trying to understand, like, as much as Afua offers, you know, this is how we decolonize our bodies, my question is, if you were raised in a colonial or a post-colonial society, and there's still all of these influences of colonialism on every level, I'm not talking just about white supremacy, but just everything, is it possible for one to fully decolonize their brain? And just kind of looking at her work, I would argue no, just because of some of the assumptions that she has made. But she does, I think, still overall, if you look at the women who follow her and just how much she talks about how they talk about Afua's methods of healing their wound through veganism, you kind of see like, okay, this woman is onto something because she has produced a particular vegan rhetoric that's very attractive to most black females, in which, you know, skinny bitch rhetoric is not, and there's a reason for that, which I talk about in my dissertation. So let me just kind of, and then lastly, I kind of wanted to talk about, which overall, not just in African holistic health, but this concept of healthy and able-bodied. So I feel that Afua's rhetoric is in part ableist, and ableist, for those who are not familiar, means that you judge and discriminate somebody because of their abilities. So if someone uses a wheelchair, if someone is legally blind, you feel that they are inferior and that they can't contribute to society. So I believe that Afua's rhetoric is in part ableist. She feels strongly that black people cannot liberate themselves until they're healthy, believing that as long as a person is sick from not eating the proper live vegan diet, they will never be able to find freedom, or her conception of freedom. So ableist rhetoric is also part of this whole ideology of normative whiteness in the USA. So when people don't kind of fall into this category of healthy, they're not seen as fully productive members of society or bodies that are worth building a nation. So first, healthy is a socially constructed term, which a lot of people don't realize, but healthy is actually a socially constructed term. And it changes with time, place, individual. And secondly, in his paper about whiteness and disability, Phil Smith writes, quote, "Like racism, ableism is also essentially ideological, rising from the same mostly unexamined assumption of biological inferiority. It asserts that people without disabilities are normal and those with disabilities are somehow not equal. Based in discrimination and oppression, it is a devaluation of disability. Ableism is equivalent to the earlier term handicapism, a cultural artifact that was compared to racism and sexism." And he talks about how this kind of constructed the ideology of the white middle class perfect body. So what I'm trying to figure out is, though most people may think of a person using a wheelchair as disabled or not the benchmark of healthy, disabled can also be used to define those who aren't healthy because they may have diabetes, they may be obese, and need to use particular methods to get around, and or are born with a congenital disease. And what is implied in Sacred Woman's pro-vegan logic is that if black females do not follow a pro-khemetic vegan diet, their wombs will not produce healthy babies. Also, those who are willing to follow Afua's pro-vegan womb healing philosophy will need access to food and culinary technologies, like I said, that in a capitalist and classist society are virtually inaccessible to black females with low income and or live in food deserts. So I'm almost done. So for Afua, black slavery was an unethical situation, so veganism becomes an ethical tool to remedy it. However, Afua's sense of ethics, though race-conscious, is exclusive, and the heteronormative gender expectation is rather colonizing towards those black people who are not straight and or do not conform to mainstream gender roles. However, these critiques are simply reminders that even with one's best intent to construct an ethical consumption practice, it will rarely, if ever, be as liberating and ethical as they think their philosophy is, and will greatly be influenced by their own privileges, or lack thereof. Afua may be a recipient of structural racism and gendered violence, but she's also a recipient of middle class, first world, and heterosexual privilege that shapes her revolutionary black feminist approach to veganism as a methodology for the racially oppressed. This is, if you ever get to the point where you write a thesis or dissertation, it's really helpful to kind of read your ideas out to people, and I'm having organizational problems with some of my work and just kind of the flow, but in part, it may have also seemed disjointed because I had to take 61 pages and kind of chop it in half for this, and I wasn't sure what things to take out, what things to leave in, because I can't assume that everyone knows all these terms. But for me, I wanted to read this because I initially, I want people to ask questions in a few minutes, but I initially started doing this work because when I did the call for papers for Sistah Vegan, which was just supposed to be an anthology, I wasn't supposed to get my academic degree in critical race theory and veganism, a lot of people on particular white-dominated sites were pissed off that I dare even suggest that being a black female would produce a different sense of vegan epistemology. And my master's thesis at Harvard kind of analyzed an entire forum's conversation on how disgusted they were of my use of the word Sistah, not sister, why would being black or being a female have anything to do with how you practice veganism. It was like 110 pages of some scary SHIT. I was like, damn. And the whole conversation kind of, it assumed that everyone on there who was reading it was probably white. But I mean, I went on there and I didn't participate. I just kind of, for several weeks, I just kind of saw how no one understood why I did the call for papers and why I was so focused on why are black women doing this for a health reason. And people are like, well, it's only for the ethical reason of animal liberation. So I'm hoping through this particular logic or rationale, through Afua's experience and just experience as a black racialized subject and looking through Afrocentrism, how health is an ethical concern if you're part of a camp or a philosophy where you do believe that before transatlantic slavery, black people essentially had a raw foods or a vegan, healthier diet and healing system, and that the unethical institution of chattel slavery took that away from us. And this particular woman is how she's kind of curing that unethical situation that she still sees kind of 400 years later in the bodies of black women. So with that, I just would like people to share their thoughts and questions. And just remember, I'm still in the process of this, so I may not be able to answer everything. Yes?
So do you see the vegan movement as a possible decolonial tool, or is it is it more an individualistic view where a black woman reclaiming reclaiming our health with veganism, or practicing veganism with the decolonial mindset as being the tool for liberation? Or do you see like the wider movement having a potential to participate in racial and other histories of oppression and struggles?
That's a big question, because it's so big, because like there are so many certain sects. So I actually think overall, if you look at why each of these sects practices veganism, it's because they are in some shape or form resisting the effects of colonialism. So if you read, what's his name, Jim Mason's book, Will Tuttle, they kind of talk about capitalism and colonialism as looking at non-human animals as units of production. And so for them, it's unethical to turn an animal that way. So kind of, let's become vegans to kind of, and they don't say decolonize, but that's how I read it, is that like, let's decolonize that use of the animal. So I kind of see in other people, like with Afua, she's looking at it differently. Like this is what colonialism did to the black body and taking away our health. So let's kind of use the khemetic vegan diet to reclaim it. So I see it, but I don't see everyone linking, and that's the problem. Like I see everyone kind of doing their own one-dimensional approach to it. But I think it's not just veganism, it's most movements in this country. They're kind of, there isn't any solidarity. There isn't any understanding, I think, that it's all connected. So a lot of people tell me they never really saw the connections to health or even race or whiteness until they kind of looked at my work and saw those connections. So that's kind of what I think is lacking, is just kind of seeing you just can't have the one-dimensional PETA approach to animal liberation. I don't think it's going to be productive in decolonizing whatever you think needs to be decolonized. But I think people are getting there. I mean, the intent is there. It's just people kind of get upset when you, like, how dare you bring in race? How dare you bring in gender, ableism, all this stuff, and then people get all pissed off, and I think that's the problem. So, and I've had that when I've talked to a lot of Black identified people in the African holistic health community. When I call out like their transphobia, their heterosexism, they yell at me. They're like, "What do you know? You're married to a honky." I mean, like I've had that. People tell me that. What do you know? You're not a real black woman. You married a white man. Like go onto Amazon.com and see this one woman who just reamed Sistah Vegan. I don't think she read it. She's like, she's not a true black woman, or her son isn't even black. I'm like, you just attacked a 3-month-old. That's messed up. So it's just like I don't see solidarity. I just see kind of people becoming differences and stuff. So I'm hoping it will change. Actually, kind of. Yeah.
Thank you. It was really a very rich and really thought-provoking talk. I'm really interested in like the politics of the term health and healthy. I'm sorry that I missed the first few minutes of me.
No, that's okay. I didn't talk about it yet.
Because I think so at least the way I got into veganism was from, forget the exact name of his book, but my mom was reading this book by Joel Furman, and he's very typical sort of white middle class, now I'm getting a little bit more self-reflective about it, about like, in some ways, and if I were to think about it through your terms, perhaps it's white middle class Americans liberating themselves from sort of a processed food regime that's telling them that they can only eat in a certain way, and so that's got its own sort of overcoming oppression in that particular form. But I guess what I've struggled with is that, and for me, what made healthiness a sort of a justifiable personal logic was that it seemed to me as a way of actually depoliticizing veganism, because rather than getting into long conversations with people about, oh, so you're like a bunny lover or a tree hugger, I could just say, no, like this is the way that I like to eat because I feel healthier and I feel better individually, personally. So in a very sort of, and again, kind of buying into that sort of like neoliberal line of reasoning where it's like, well, that's your personal choice. And so for me, it's really striking that health would be invoked by Queen Afua in the sense that it's actually very radically a decolonizing kind of gesture to think about your personal health in that sense. So I don't know, it's more of a comment question, but I guess I want to hear more about like the different ways that you've seen this notion of health invoked differently by, say, like that very white kind of mainstream literature, or if there's any kind of trajectory or difference.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a lot that needs to be looked at, but I'm specifically looking at fat body, I put that in quotations, and that as constructed as unhealthy. And I'm just getting into that, and that's not going to be in my dissertation, that's going to be another project. But I kind of will talk about it in the conclusion, like, this is how the direction can go. But I find, I'm very critical of this national public health push to end obesity and fatness. And I'm just really curious about that. And then I look at the race and sexual implications of that, or sex implications, looking at, as usual, the black, fat, female body as the benchmark of immoral, unhealthy body. And then kind of looking at the white, middle-class, skinny bitch aesthetic of what is healthy. And then kind of really understanding, is it, do you really, where does the BMI come from? Why is it a BMI of 20? Who dictates that is supposed to be healthy? Why is it that skinny is conflated with healthy? That's kind of what I'm looking at. And there are a lot of fat studies, work, the scholarship being done, that kind of, women are saying, I am a size 22, and I'm very athletic, I've been healthy my entire life, I'm not necessarily vegan, but just saying, I'm healthy. And there's this one woman that I saw on her blog, she's a dancer, and she's a very large, she's considered an obese woman. She's very fit, very flexible, and when she goes out on stage to try out for things, people snicker, they make comments immediately because they see her body. But then she dances and she shows her flexibility and her athleticism and her strength, and then they get confused because they're like, we've been told all along that fat people are unproductive and aren't strong. So this is kind of where I start getting interested, because there's so much in veganism that says, veganism, go vegan and you'll be healthy. Go vegan and you'll be healthy. And I've had so many people write me privately saying, I'm one of those vegans that turned vegan and I still have health problems. They're ashamed. And I'm like, okay, so when did veganism equal you're going to cure all your health problems? And that's kind of what I'm interested in, and this shaming of people. I have a friend who has fibromyalgia. Sorry if I can't pronounce it. Yeah, and she has an 80-something-year-old white female vegan saying to her, what are you doing wrong? What are you doing wrong? Veganism, when you turn vegan, you shouldn't have any health problems. She's just crying. She's like, this person does not understand. So that's kind of what I'm interested in, this rhetoric of veganism equals skinny equals healthy. And kind of where does that come from? And then I have to do a genealogy of really understanding the construction of health and looking at Foucault and how the body is kind of a representation of the white middle class's values and beliefs. So that's kind of where I'm going. That's kind of long, but you can see I'm excited about it because it's not being done. But Julie Guthman's book just came out. It's about
weighing in.
Yeah, weighing in. Yeah, thanks. And she looks at. Do you know the title? It's weighing in.
I can't remember the whole
It's
thing.
about obesity and the limits of capitalism and looking at the alternative food movement. It literally just is hot off the press. And she looks at that. She looks at this, conflating fat with unhealthy, kind of looking at this rhetoric in the alternative food movement. Just came out. I highly suggest it. I only read the introduction. I'm like, I can't wait until I'm done with my dissertation so I can finish reading that. So there are people kind of looking more into that, how health has been constructed and kind of really understanding how it's, nothing, even though it's scientifically proven what's healthy. Of course, science is a product of society, and it's going to be influenced by the status quos, what their political and economic investments are to kind of keep their privileges alive. Yeah, so, anyone who hasn't asked a question yet? Yes?
Yeah, just because you mentioned Julie Guthman, because she wrote a lot about some of the problematic natures of the alternative food movement and how it can represent a lot of white privilege and things like that. And one of her colleagues wrote something recently comparing the gourmet ghetto in North Berkeley, the farmers market there, to West Oakland. And basically the argument was that it's pretty much impossible for us, North Berkeley, to subvert the norms that they're in terms of the ideologies about nature and romanticizing all these things and not really understanding some of the connections, the things that they're overlooking. So that basically they're screwed in that extent. And then she was saying that you could overcome it in terms of West Oakland by starting with race and situating yourself with race. And so I was kind of wondering if in your work you have seen any sort of intersection between those two polarities, because I feel like that's it's a really good place to start, and using race and femininity as a place to.
Yeah. Well, to answer your question, Yes, this has actually been going on since colonialism, but it hasn't hit the radars of the mainstream media. So, I mean, I shouldn't make this generalization. So I'll say, with my experience, most of my friends of color, we already knew this. Like, we already knew that we're going to start, you have to start from a race-conscious perspective because it's survival. So it's not new to those that are actually living that life and kind of organizing amongst themselves for food security reasons and whatnot. But it is new to the Western Academy. And it's new in terms of scholars like myself and I guess anti-racist white activists that want to bring that into mainstream academy. But to answer your question, it isn't like, it's not like a new thing, because if you look at most movements and the problems between non-white racialized minorities and white middle class, you'll see it in like every case, like the non-white racialized minorities from the get-go, they are race conscious, they understand how white supremacy like F's up their life, and they have to start with that understanding, and then they'll put it in their food justice or their anti-prison industrial complex or their environmentalism, you'll see it. And then with like the theme with the white middle class is that they just are like, we're post-racial, even to say anything about race is racism. So like, it's just like, it's really funny. And if you look at Julie Guthman's work and the new book, Cultivating Food Justice, Race, Class, and Sustainability, she has a chapter in there where she goes and talks to the white farmers market, high officials or high people who are like run particular stands, and you know they're like, you know, you ask me questions about race, and I felt this was inappropriate. I'm not going to fill out a form or talk about, you know, why there aren't more ethnic minorities coming to the farmers market. We just try to reach out to everybody and to target racialized minorities as racist. I'm like, wow. And that was like kind of a reoccurring theme through her work. So like, it's not just veganism. You'll see that just about anywhere amongst the collective demographic of white middle class neoliberal people who really have this post-racial approach to life. And you'll see the exact opposite to most non-white racialized subjects in this country.
So I guess my question is have you seen anywhere where those separations are becoming less problematic, or like, I just feel like it's kind of depressing being like a citizen of Berkeley and seeing that happen. And I guess, have you seen anything that's kind of like pushing that consciousness like in academia or in just in North Berkeley? So you think it has to start in like university context?
Well, that's the thing,
and
like,
to the community?
I have seen, I mean, I did this is what I'm doing what I'm doing. So, because I feel like, okay, I need to create a language, and I've been attacked for like kind of pandering to the emotional needs of white people by changing my language to fit their needs. That's another conversation, but that's what I'm trying to do. But I also see in the academic circuit books like Cultivating Food Justice, with all of these people from all different ethnic backgrounds, and white racialized people as well, coming together and kind of writing about these problems. I mean, Julie Guthman is one person, she's been doing it for a while. So I do see it more, that when I see it more through literature, through edited volumes where you see all different people from all racialized embodied experiences kind of contributing and showing that, yo, this is a problem. So I do see it. And I see it, I am kind of hopeful. And sometimes I turn the news on and then I'm like, okay, I'm not so hopeful when I see certain things happening. But overall, because I'm seeing it being accepted in the academy, in terms of edited volumes or special issues in magazines where you see like a lot of critical white scholars talking about the problems of whiteness, then I become hopeful. And I think it's really interesting, like, for the most part, it seems like white folk are more willing to listen to someone about racism and whiteness as a problem if they are a white person saying it. So, and there's been studies that talk about that, like, you know, if I go out and say, at least growing up, I was like the angry black female. But like a white guy says the same thing, and he's like, oh my God, you're so progressive. You know, you're not angry. So I'm like, ah. So kind of like, that's kind of what I've been saying too. But I'm like, hey, you know, if Tim Wise is doing his thing, and granted, he's like the highest paid, probably anti-racist activist in the world. Okay, in the USA. And I'm like, okay, it's not like white people have been doing this forever for nothing, but at least, you know, there are a lot of white people who are like, Tim Wise said. So I'm like, okay, at least it's coming into your consciousness, and it had to be through this guy, but if that's how it's going to be, then I'm just going to kind of let it, just kind of let go that, you know, I am doing it for free, so, yeah.
I think pretty new to the academy is looking at feminist and queer approaches to looking at the non-human animal, especially with the idea of care and embracing that, and then the queering the idea of species and the myth of species. I was wondering if you ever encountered decolonial approaches to the look at the non-human animal, given the long history that animals have had with people of color, especially particularly in the United States and with slavery and things like that.
So do you mean like looking at the subject of the relationship with the animal not within a like commodifying approach, like a colonialistic relationship, and looking at how maybe indigenous people had relationships with animals before colonialism? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess both of those.
I have not.
Okay.
But, because I'm not going to make up stuff, I don't make up stuff. But I can send you to literature where people are kind of, like actual vegans, indigenous vegans are struggling with that. Like, okay, so I'm vegan because it is an act of decolonialism and how animals have been colonized within the Western context. But then kind of like, well, what does it mean that my people had a relationship with animals outside of that context? And they're kind of that struggle with that. So, and I can send you, like, there are people who are doing that work. It's just not mine, because mine's more focused on black females. But it exists. Is there anyone else, if anyone who hasn't asked a question, yes?
First, presented your work to more like a predominantly black audience, and how was the reaction in the class different?
Let's see. So far, I don't know if I actually have. Oh yeah, at Cafe Gratitude, when I was, yeah, you're laughing, it's no way, but when I was assistant vegan, but it was all black women that came, well, they're all 7 of us that came, and it was like, it's different, like, because we all were like, Queen Afua, like, that's how we were talking. And in general, it's not when I present my work in a physical space, but it's like when I'm online and talking to largely black and brown crowds, it's like, I mean, I'm just kind of using analogies, but like we're like, is that an analogy or a metaphor? I was confused. Or a simile. Like, I feel like we're at the PhD level of understanding critical, like we have a critical race literacy that's at a PhD level. And we're just already talking from the get-go. We already know what's going on. And like, it's just more comfortable. And then I find, mostly with white audiences, it feels like I have to like put in a lot of introductory stuff, and I have to remember I can't make certain assumptions that this particular demographic is going to know what I'm talking about for many reasons. But the difference is like we just can jump right into it. I don't have to like explain what colonialism is. The difference between like what overt racism is compared to covert, like we already know the language. It's like that's our language, and that's the difference. And it's cool. I mean, I think it's important to be able to kind of go and talk to all different types of audiences. And depending what the audiences are, I'll sing, I'll read from something, I won't read from something. It's just kind of, I'm figuring out, I realize that due to one's like social placement, those particular like white middle class have a particular communication style. And if you look at the newest research that merges critical race theory with communication studies, you'll begin to see that. So like I'm trying to understand that, literally, these communication styles. And my dad used to tell me when I was like really just pissed off with racism, he's like, you can't say it that way. You're going to piss off white people. Like he's just being honest, like you can't say, you have to learn the language of the colonizer to explain to them why colonialism was bad. So I was like, I was just like, what the hell are you talking about? I was like so pissed off, and I was a teenager, but now I get it as a graduate student. I'm learning, I have to learn all of these tools and the way to present it in that particular language. And it is working. Like 12 years ago, it never worked because my language was more for the collectivity of black people that my family members and people I associate with. It was just, that was my language, and that was the language that we were used to using. But if I used it in white middle class America, suddenly it was like, it was offensive, it made white people scared, and all these things. So this is kind of what I've had to learn with my own work, is kind of finding particular types of communication styles to convey the same information.
I want to be respectful of people's time, and it's 10 minutes, almost 10 minutes past 7:30, so if you're okay staying around, maybe.
I actually can't because I have a newborn who needs breast. So my husband, I just saw him, he just text messaged me at 7:34 because he can't lactate. So, so yeah, what's up with that, right? So I gave him a bottle of milk, but I don't know how much he drinks, so he just wrote it. So I really appreciate everyone's questions because it's really helping. This is very helpful. So if you can contact me via email, and I do have a newborn and a 2-year-old, so, and trying to finish the dissertation, so I may not respond to you immediately, but I will always say I've acknowledged your email. I will try to respond to you when I have time, okay? So just to understand that, because I don't have childcare, because all that fun stuff in America, you live in a country where they don't things like that. So this is my email address. Breeze Harper, like my name, at Gmail. Okay? Is that, you can see that? And if you can't, if you're visually impaired, it's breeze like the wind, Harper at gmail.com. Okay? So.